May 3, 1998. The sky over Denver stretched pale blue, with the early sun warming the edges of the Rockies in the distance. The neighborhood of Hilltop was still waking up. Porches creaked, sprinklers hissed, and the smell of fresh-cut grass lingered in the air. Emily Carter tied her sneakers tight, adjusted her cassette player, and pressed play. Alanis Morissette's voice filled her ears. "Be back by 9, her mother called from the kitchen window, holding a mug of coffee. "Promise," Emily smiled, waving as she jogged down the driveway. She was 17, the kind of girl people described as light itself, captain of the cross-country team, honor student, always the first to volunteer. Her life felt wide open, and that morning she ran with the rhythm of someone who believed the world was safe. The Cherry Creek Trail wound through the park like a silver ribbon. Cottonwoods whispered above her, their leaves trembling in the soft breeze. She greeted a man walking his dog, waved to a cyclist. Everything about the morning felt ordinary, until it didn't. Near the bridge, a white pickup truck was parked just off the gravel path. She barely noticed it. Trucks were common in Denver, but a small detail flickered, its engine running, no driver in sight. She felt a momentary chill, but brushed it off, pushing forward with longer strides. Back home, Linda Carter wiped the counter and looked at the clock. 8:42 a.m. Emily should have been home by now. She poured another cup of coffee, telling herself not to worry. Her husband David sat reading the Denver Post at the table. "She's probably with that friend. What's her name again? Jenna?" he said without looking up. Linda nodded, though a quiet unease tightened in her chest. Emily was punctual, almost obsessively so. 10 more minutes passed. The clock ticked louder. At 9:10, Linda called Jenna's house. No answer. Then she called another friend, still nothing. The third call went straight to voicemail. David finally looked up, sensing the shift in her tone. "She's fine, Lynn. Probably lost track of time." But when he saw her eyes, fixed, frightened, he stood. By 9:30, Linda was outside, calling Emily's name down the street, voice trembling. Neighbors joined, concern spreading like a ripple. Someone suggested checking the trail. David grabbed his keys, and together they drove toward Cherry Creek. Emily's favorite song still played faintly through her headphones, lying tangled beside the path. One sneaker was found near the edge of the creek bed. When the police arrived, the calm suburban air turned heavy. Officers stretched yellow tape, reporters began to gather, and whispers spread through the crowd. Detective Carl Henderson, tall and steady, stepped out of his car, surveying the scene. "How long has she been missing?" 2 hours, David said. His voice cracked. Henderson nodded grimly. "All right, let's start the search." The morning that began like any other was already turning into something the city of Denver would never forget. And if stories like this draw you in, stories where the truth hides beneath ordinary mornings, stay with us, because what happened to Emily Carter is only the beginning. By noon, the sun hung high over Denver, casting long streaks of light through the cottonwoods along Cherry Creek Trail. Volunteers gathered near the bridge where Emily's sneaker and headphones had been found. Police cruisers lined the road, radios crackling with clipped voices. The once peaceful park was now filled with tension, footsteps, and fear. Detective Carl Henderson adjusted his sunglasses and spoke quietly to Officer Reynolds. "We'll start a grid search from the bridge to the South Bend. K9 units in 15. Keep the press back." Linda Carter stood nearby, clutching Emily's sweatshirt against her chest. Her hands trembled, her lips pale. She looked to the trail, as if her daughter might come jogging out any second, smiling, apologizing for worrying everyone. David stood behind her, silent, eyes hollow. "Mrs. Carter," Henderson said gently, "I need to confirm what Emily was wearing when she left." Linda nodded quickly. Grey joggers, white tank top, her school jacket tied around her waist. "Any jewelry?" "A bracelet, maybe?" "Yes, silver bracelet with a small heart charm, her grandmother's." The detective wrote it all down. He'd worked missing persons cases before, but something about this one hit different. The normalcy of it, the good family, the clean record, none of it made sense. By early afternoon, more than 50 volunteers from the neighborhood joined the search. Teens from East High held hands in prayer circles, whispering Emily's name. Reporters from Channel 7 and the Denver Post arrived, microphones ready, faces set in practiced concern. "Ma'am, can you tell us how long she's been missing?" one reporter asked. Linda didn't answer. Her voice had already broken too many times. A few blocks away, Jenna Morris, Emily's best friend, sat on the edge of her bed clutching the phone. She'd already spoken to police twice, but couldn't shake the memory of their last conversation the night before. Emily had mentioned someone following her car a few days earlier, but she'd laughed it off, saying, "Probably just some guy from school messing around." Jenna hadn't thought to tell anyone then. Now, guilt pressed heavy against her chest. At 3 p.m., the search expanded to the creek itself. Divers scanned the shallow waters, their movements slow, deliberate. Nothing. Henderson walked the perimeter, his boots crunching over gravel. He paused when a volunteer called out, only a torn piece of fabric caught in the weeds. As dusk crept over Denver, the air grew cold. Flashlights blinked along the trail, voices fading into the distance. One by one, volunteers were sent home. Linda refused to leave. "She's out there," she whispered. "I can feel her." Henderson placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll keep looking, I promise you that." When night finally fell, the searchlights cut through the darkness like white knives. The creek whispered softly under the bridge, carrying secrets no one could yet hear. And somewhere beneath the hum of engines and radio chatter, Denver began to realize this wasn't just another missing person case. Something far darker had begun, and no one in the city was ready for what the next day would bring. The following morning, Denver woke to Emily Carter's face on every front page. Teen missing after morning jog. The photo, her wide smile, freckles across her nose, seemed too bright for the grim headline beneath it. News anchors spoke her name like a prayer. By sunrise, hundreds of residents had already gathered at the park, carrying flashlights, gloves, and flyers printed overnight at the local copy shop. At East High School, the hallways were silent. Lockers that usually slammed and echoed now stood untouched. Students wore yellow ribbons pinned to their shirts. Jenna's idea. She sat in the cafeteria surrounded by her friends, but none of them spoke. A teacher approached gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "If you need to go home, honey, that's okay." Jenna shook her head. "Emily wouldn't skip school. I'm not either." Her voice cracked, but she meant it. Back on Cherry Creek Trail, police continued their search. The air smelled of rain from the night before, and the muddy ground held deep footprints, too many to tell which might be hers. Detective Henderson moved methodically, notebook in hand, eyes sharp. He paused near the creek bank where a volunteer found a hair tie tangled in reeds. Linda Carter stood a few yards away, clinging to David's arm. She looked exhausted, her face hollowed by sleeplessness. "She always wore her hair up when she ran," Linda whispered. "That's hers." Henderson took it gently, nodding to the officer beside him. "We'll get it tested right away." Across the city, radio stations paused their morning playlists to share updates. Hosts spoke solemnly, urging anyone with information to come forward. Strangers called in, swearing they'd seen something. A white truck near the park, a figure by the bridge, headlights around 8 a.m. Most leads went nowhere. Still, Henderson followed each one, scribbling notes, refusing to let the case fade. By late afternoon, a candlelight vigil formed outside the Carters' home. Dozens gathered, holding posters and photos of Emily. A local pastor led a quiet prayer, his words trembling through the evening breeze. Linda listened, eyes fixed on the single candle she held. The wax dripped down her fingers, hot and stinging, but she didn't move. A young reporter from Channel 9 approached cautiously. "Mrs. Carter, would you like to say something to our viewers?" Linda hesitated. Her lips parted, but no words came. David stepped forward instead, voice low and steady. "Please. If anyone knows anything at all, help us bring our daughter home." The crowd murmured softly. Someone began to sing "Amazing Grace." Voices joined one by one until the melody filled the block. That night, Denver's city lights shimmered beneath a thin layer of fog. Flyers flapped against telephone poles, their corners damp and curling. The search had turned into a vigil, and the vigil into a ritual of waiting. Inside the Carter home, Emily's bedroom remained untouched, bed neatly made, track medals hanging by the mirror, her running shoes placed by the door. Linda stood in the doorway, whispering, "Good night, baby," before turning off the light. Outside, the wind carried her words into the quiet Denver night, a city already holding its breath for what tomorrow might bring. By the third day, Denver's calm had fractured. The police tip line rang non-stop, each call a whisper of rumor, each voice claiming to know something. Most were dead ends, but Detective Carl Henderson listened to everyone, pencil scratching furiously across his notepad. Every name mattered now. "Her boyfriend, Jason Miller," Officer Reynolds said, flipping through reports. 17, lives 2 blocks from the Carters. Says he hasn't seen her since Friday night. Henderson leaned back, frowning. "Bring him in." Jason arrived at the precinct with his mother. His eyes were red, not from crying, but exhaustion. "I didn't do anything," he said immediately. "We had a fight, yeah, but she left. I thought she just needed space." "What was the fight about?" Henderson asked. Jason hesitated. "College. She wanted to go to Boulder. I wanted to stay here. It wasn't bad. She was fine when she left." "Did you drive that morning?" "No." He exhaled sharply. "You think I hurt her? You think I could?" The detective studied him in silence. Jason's hands shook, his jaw tight, but his fear felt genuine. Still, Henderson had learned long ago that guilt and grief could look the same. Outside the station, reporters swarmed, eager for details. "Is the boyfriend a suspect?" one shouted. Henderson said nothing. The fewer answers he gave, the longer the questions would stay alive. By afternoon, gossip had infected the city. At East High, whispers spread through hallways like wildfire. Some said Emily had been planning to run away. Others claimed she'd been seeing someone older, a college student from Cherry Creek. Jenna slammed her locker shut in frustration. "People don't know what they're talking about," she said to her friend Rachel. "Emily wouldn't just leave, she wouldn't." Rachel's eyes darted nervously. "Then what happened to her?" Jenna didn't answer. She couldn't. Across town, Henderson met with the maintenance worker who'd been near the trail the morning Emily disappeared. The man, Harold Price, was in his late 40s, with calloused hands and tired eyes. "I saw her jog past," Harold said. "Same as every Sunday. She waved. I waved back." "Did you notice anyone else?" "Any vehicles?" He rubbed his chin. "That white pickup was there again, engine running, no one inside, gave me the creeps." Henderson's head lifted. "You've seen it before?" "Couple of times. Always parked near the trail entrance." "Never thought much of it." The detective made a note, his pulse quickening. It wasn't much, but it was something. That evening, Linda Carter sat in the living room, watching the local news. The anchor's voice filled the room. "Police are questioning multiple suspects in the disappearance of 17-year-old Emily Carter." Her face crumpled. David turned off the TV. "She's out there," he said softly. "We'll find her." But as night settled over Denver, Henderson's gut twisted with unease. Rumors were multiplying faster than evidence, and truth was slipping through his fingers. He stared at the caseboard, photos, maps, lists of names, and whispered to himself, "Someone knows. Someone always knows." A week passed, and Cherry Creek Trail no longer sounded like laughter or running feet. It was quiet now, hauntingly quiet. The wildflowers that once framed the path had begun to wilt under the weight of trampled grass and police tape. The community had searched every inch, and still there was no sign of Emily Carter. Detective Carl Henderson walked the trail alone that morning, his boots crunching against dry soil. He'd read every report twice, replayed every interview in his mind. Each lead had ended the same way, in silence. The white pickup, the boyfriend, the maintenance worker, none had given him the answer that gnawed at his thoughts every night. Where did she go? At the Carter home, Linda sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of coffee in front of her. The calendar on the wall still showed May 3rd, the day Emily disappeared. She couldn't bring herself to move it forward. David stood by the sink, arms crossed, his face tight with frustration. "She's been gone 8 days," he muttered. 8, and they still have nothing. Linda's voice cracked. "They're doing what they can." "Are they?" he snapped. Then his tone softened. "I'm sorry. I just can't stand not knowing." Outside, neighbors placed more flowers on the porch, quiet gestures of sympathy that somehow made the house feel emptier. Every night, the same porch light stayed on, Linda's unspoken beacon for Emily's return. At the precinct, Henderson stared at the missing persons board. The photos of Emily, smiling in her track uniform, laughing with friends, looked almost alive. He couldn't shake the image of her running into the morning sun, never to return. His partner, Reynolds, dropped a fresh report onto the desk. "Nothing from forensics," Reynolds said. "The fabric found near the creek wasn't hers." Henderson sighed, rubbing his temples. "So we're back to zero." "Pretty much." He turned toward the window, watching the clouds gather over the city. "Every hour that passes makes it harder. People start moving on." "Not her family," Reynolds replied quietly. That evening, Henderson returned to the trail. The setting sun painted the water orange, and the sound of cicadas buzzed in the air. He crouched near the bridge where the first shoe had been found and closed his eyes. He imagined her, breathing steady, hair pulled back, focused on her next step. He wondered if she'd seen someone she knew, if she'd had time to be afraid. Back in Hilltop, Jenna sat on her bed surrounded by photos of her and Emily. She scrolled through her journal, rereading entries from months before. In one, Emily had written, "Sometimes I feel like people only see the version of me they want to see." Jenna traced the words with her finger, tears spilling silently. The trail was silent, but the city wasn't. Rumors still buzzed in coffee shops and grocery lines. Yet beneath the noise, Denver's heartbeat had changed, slower, heavier. Something pure had vanished with Emily, and everyone could feel the hollow space she'd left behind. 25 years had passed since Emily Carter vanished, yet Denver still whispered her name. Cherry Creek Trail had changed, new benches, trimmed trees, a bike lane. But beneath the asphalt, the memory of that missing girl lingered like a scar. Detective Carl Henderson, now 71, sat on his porch overlooking the foothills, a mug of black coffee warming his hands. Retirement hadn't brought peace. He still woke before dawn, his mind chasing unsolved cases through the fog of age. But Emily's case, her case, never let him rest. A newspaper lay open beside him. The date read April 2023. The world had moved on. Electric cars, digital forensics, everything faster. Yet the photo printed on page 7 froze him mid-sip. Colorado Cold Case Unit reopens 1998. Disappearance of teen runner. He stared at the headline until the letters blurred. The article was brief. DNA technology had identified a new lead connected to an item recovered near the original search site. No further details released. He exhaled slowly. After all these years. Inside, his wife, Marjorie, appeared in the doorway. "You're thinking about her again." "I never stopped," he said quietly. She studied him for a moment. "Maybe this time they'll find something." Henderson nodded, though doubt shadowed his expression. He'd seen false hope too many times. Still by noon, he was driving toward downtown Denver, the mountains receding in his rearview mirror. The cold case unit was tucked inside the Denver police headquarters, a sterile building that smelled of disinfectant and burnt coffee. Detective Lisa Navarro, mid-30s, greeted him with a firm handshake. "Detective Henderson, thank you for coming. We've been meaning to reach out." "Call me Carl," he said. "You found something." She motioned to a file on the desk. A piece of evidence was retested. A partial DNA profile from a jacket tie. One we didn't have the tech to analyze back then. It matched a name in the national database. Henderson's heartbeat quickened. "Whose?" Navarro hesitated. "Ryan Blake. He was in Emily's year at East High. No criminal record, but he left Colorado in 1999. Henderson's brow furrowed. "Ryan Blake, the track team. Quiet kid, never on our radar." "Exactly," Navarro said. We're contacting him now. He lives in Oregon. The room fell silent. The hum of a nearby copier filled the air. Henderson leaned back, processing the name, the years, the weight of what this could mean. "Do her parents know?" he asked. "Not yet. We're waiting for confirmation before we reach out." He nodded slowly. "Linda deserves the truth, whatever it is." Navarro closed the file gently. "If you're willing, I'd like you to consult. You know this case better than anyone." For the first time in years, Henderson felt purpose flicker inside him, fragile but real. Outside, the sky was turning gold over the Rockies, the same color it had been the morning Emily disappeared. He stood at the edge of the parking lot, the air thin and cool, and whispered, "It's time." The Denver skyline shimmered under the afternoon sun as Detective Lisa Navarro flipped through the old case files spread across her desk. The pages were yellowed, corners torn, yet each photograph still carried a pulse. Emily's smile, the trail, the white pickup truck frozen in grainy film. Across from her, Carl Henderson sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the faded evidence tags. "So, Ryan Blake," Navarro said. "Graduated East High, moved to Oregon a year after Emily's disappearance. Never arrested, no known connection to her family. But the DNA match is solid, partial but consistent across multiple samples." Henderson's voice was rough, steady. "He was a good kid, ran track. His mother used to volunteer at the school library. Never caused trouble." "Sometimes it's the ones you don't expect," Navarro replied, glancing up. "We already contacted Oregon State Police. They've located him." Henderson raised a brow. "You've spoken to him?" "Not yet. They're setting up an interview, but he seemed calm. Didn't ask what it was about, just said, 'I knew this day would come.'" The words hit Henderson like a cold draft. He looked down at the photograph of Emily, her laughter caught mid-frame. "He said that?" Navarro nodded. "Exactly that." Henderson leaned back, his mind unraveling 25 years of memory. The trail, the truck, the unanswered questions, it all circled back to the same place. "If he's innocent, he wouldn't say something like that." Navarro hesitated. "Or maybe he's been carrying guilt for a different reason. Survivor's guilt. People process trauma in strange ways." Henderson tapped the edge of the file. "No, this isn't guilt. It's foreknowledge." The following morning, Henderson drove to Cherry Creek Trail. It was spring again, the air crisp, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Joggers passed by, earbuds in, oblivious to the history beneath their feet. He stopped near the bridge, staring at the plaque that read, "In memory of those who never made it home." Someone had added fresh flowers beneath it. He spoke softly, almost to himself. "We're closer now, Emily." Back at headquarters, Navarro's phone buzzed. She answered quickly. "Navarro," a voice crackled through. "This is Detective Rowe, Oregon State Police. We've got Blake in custody." He didn't resist, said he'd been waiting to talk. Navarro's pulse quickened. "Is he requesting counsel?" "Not yet." He asked if the man who led the case in '98 is still alive. Navarro looked across the office. Henderson stood by the window, sunlight cutting across his lined face. "He is," she said. "Then Blake wants him there." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Henderson finally said, "Book the next flight." As Navarro hung up, she caught her reflection in the window, eyes tired but alert. The city outside glowed gold under the sinking sun. After decades of silence, the truth was moving again, and somewhere, far from Denver, Ryan Blake was waiting, with answers no one was ready to hear. News traveled fast through Denver, faster than it had in 1998. Within hours of Ryan Blake's arrest, the story spread across every local feed and national headline. Colorado cold case breakthrough. Former classmate arrested in 1998. Disappearance of Emily Carter. The headline alone was enough to stir up ghosts that had long been buried. On the quiet streets of Hilltop, neighbors who hadn't spoken of Emily in years gathered again on their porches, voices low, eyes wide. The same people who'd searched the creek and passed out flyers now whispered about betrayal and hidden truth. "He was just a kid," one woman said, clutching her robe. "I saw him help hang posters back then." At the Carter home, Linda sat at the dining table, the news station glowing in front of her. The reporter's voice was calm, measured. Police have confirmed that new DNA evidence links Ryan Blake, a former classmate of the victim, to materials found at the original scene. She didn't blink. Her hand gripped the edge of the table until her knuckles turned white. David stood behind her, his reflection faint in the darkened TV screen. "Do you believe it?" he asked quietly. Linda's voice was hoarse. "I don't know what I believe anymore." The phone began ringing, first reporters, then friends, then strangers. She let them all go to voicemail. 25 years of waiting had taught her that closure was just another word people used when they didn't have answers. Across town at East High School, the faculty gathered in the teacher's lounge. A few of them still remembered Ryan, polite, soft-spoken, never in trouble. Mr. Dalton, the old history teacher, sipped his coffee and shook his head. "I wrote him a recommendation letter for college. He wanted to study architecture." The younger teachers, who only knew the case through documentaries, exchanged uneasy glances. To them, it was no longer a tragedy. It was history repeating itself. That evening, a vigil formed again at Cherry Creek Trail. The crowd was smaller this time, older, faces lined by years and grief. Linda stood among them, silent as candles flickered in the cool spring wind. Some offered condolences. Others simply stood near her, unsure of what words could still matter. Detective Henderson arrived late, stepping carefully through the crowd. When Linda saw him, she nodded once, eyes glistening. "They said you're back on it," she murmured. "Consulting," he replied softly, "just until it's over." She studied him for a moment. "Do they ever really end?" Henderson didn't answer. He looked toward the bridge instead, where the creek murmured beneath the darkness, carrying echoes of a voice that once laughed there. In living rooms across Colorado, people argued over dinner tables. Some believed Ryan's arrest meant justice at last. Others said the police were desperate, chasing ghosts with science and luck. And while the debate raged, one truth cut through the noise: Denver was remembering. Old pain had resurfaced, and the town that had once promised to move on was right back where it began, staring into the same mystery, now older, heavier, and far more personal. The air inside the interrogation room felt still, almost sterile. A faint hum from the ceiling vent was the only sound as Ryan Blake sat across from Detective Lisa Navarro. His wrists rested on the table, untethered. He wasn't under arrest, at least not yet. The fluorescent light reflected in his calm, almost detached eyes. "Ryan," Navarro began, her tone measured, "thank you for coming in. We just want to talk about a case from 1998. You might remember it. Emily Carter." He nodded slowly. "Of course I remember. You went to school together." "Same classes, same track team," he said quietly. "She was nice. Everyone liked her." Detective Carl Henderson watched from the corner, arms folded. The older man hadn't spoken yet, but Ryan's gaze kept flicking toward him, a faint recognition behind his eyes. "You were questioned back then," Navarro continued. "Just a few standard questions. You said you didn't know her well." Ryan leaned back, exhaling softly. "That was a long time ago. I was scared." Everyone was scared. The cops were treating all of us like suspects. Navarro slid a photo across the table. Emily's track meet portrait, the same one used in the missing posters. "You told the original investigators you hadn't seen her the week she disappeared." "I hadn't," he said quickly, but his voice carried a hesitation, a crack barely visible. Henderson finally spoke, voice gravelly from age. "You had a white pickup truck in '98. Sold it a year later. Where is it now?" Ryan's eyes flickered. "Scrapped. Oregon, I think." "Why?" "Because fibers from that truck were found on her jacket tie," Henderson said. "Fibers that didn't match anyone else." Ryan's jaw tightened. He didn't look shocked, just tired. "You think that proves something?" Navarro leaned forward. "We think it means you were closer to her than you told us." Ryan's lips curved slightly, almost a smirk. "You know what's funny? After 25 years, people still think they can piece together the truth from dust and memory." Henderson stepped closer, his voice low but sharp. We're not guessing, son. DNA doesn't forget. For a long moment, Ryan said nothing. His fingers tapped the table, steady, deliberate. Then he sighed. I didn't hurt her. I swear on my life. Then help us understand, Navarro said. How did your DNA end up there? He looked down, his hands clasped tightly. I can't explain that. Navarro studied him, the silence stretching thin. You mean you won't? Ryan finally looked up, eyes steady. You think you're digging up truth. But sometimes truth's just another way of destroying what's left. Henderson's stare didn't waver. That's not for you to decide. Outside the observation window, two officers exchanged uneasy glances. The interview had gone colder than expected. Not because of denial, but because of something heavier, something unsaid. As Ryan was escorted out, Navarro turned to Henderson. He's hiding something. But it's not fear, it's control. Henderson nodded. And whatever he's holding back, it's big enough to keep buried for 25 years. Detective Lisa Navarro stared at the forensics report spread across her desk, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. The lab results from the recovered jacket fibers had just come in, and the findings were damning. The DNA matched Ryan Blake, but there was more. Trace elements of engine oil and a unique metallic residue, the kind used in old Ford pickups, had been identified as well. She turned to Carl Henderson, who stood by the window, silent and unreadable. It's not just the fibers, she said. There's secondary residue, matching the truck we've been chasing since 1998. That same model, that same year. Henderson's voice was low. Ryan's truck. Exactly. The old detective rubbed his jaw. I can't stop thinking about that day. He showed up to the volunteer search the same afternoon Emily went missing, smiling, shaking hands, bringing bottled water for the team. Navarro frowned. He inserted himself into the investigation. That's a classic sign. Or guilt, Henderson muttered. But there's a problem. He's not reacting like a guilty man. She dropped the report on the table. He's reacting like someone who knows something bigger than the accusation. They drove to the evidence warehouse, where boxes from the original case were still stacked in faded cardboard towers. Henderson opened one marked 1998. Carter, E. Inside, beneath plastic sleeves and chain of custody tags, lay the fragments of a life. Emily's watch, her shoe, her torn cassette player, her school ID. Henderson's hand trembled slightly as he lifted a small envelope labeled Vehicle Trace Samples. These were taken from the trail entrance, he said quietly. We found tire tracks, but the rain wiped out most of it. We never matched them. Navarro examined the contents, old photographs blurred but detailed enough. These treads are from a Goodyear Wrangler. Those were standard on the '95 Ford F-150. Henderson's heart sank. The same model Ryan drove. Navarro straightened. We'll need a warrant for that mechanic he used back then. If we find anyone who worked on that truck, they might remember something. Later that day, they tracked down a retired mechanic named Paul Hanley, who had once worked at Denver Auto and Tire in the late 90s. His small house smelled of oil and coffee, walls lined with faded certificates. Ryan Blake? Paul repeated, brow furrowing. Yeah, I remember that kid. Brought his truck in a few days after that girl went missing. Said he hit something near the trail, front bumper was dented. He wanted it fixed fast, no paperwork. Navarro's pen froze. He said he hit something. Yeah, Paul said. Wouldn't say what. He looked spooked, though, like he'd seen a ghost. Henderson's stomach twisted. 25 years of silence, and the story was beginning to crack. Back in the car, Navarro whispered. He wasn't hiding the crime. He was hiding the truth about what happened that morning. Henderson stared through the windshield, jaw set. Then it's time we find out exactly what or who he hit. Ryan Blake sat in the interrogation room again, this time without the quiet composure he'd shown before. His hands were clasped together, knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the table. Navarro placed the new forensic report in front of him but didn't speak right away. The silence stretched, thick and deliberate. Finally, she said, The mechanic remembers you, Ryan. You brought in your truck right after Emily disappeared. You told him you'd hit something near the trail. Ryan didn't flinch, but a flicker of tension crossed his jaw. That was a deer. Was it? Navarro leaned forward. Because there were no animal traces on your bumper. There was fabric, grey, synthetic, consistent with jogging clothes. Ryan's breathing deepened. That doesn't mean anything. Henderson, sitting beside her, spoke softly but firmly. You know, I've seen a lot of guilty men, Ryan. Most lie to protect themselves, but you're protecting someone else. Ryan's eyes darted up. You don't know what you're talking about. Then help me understand, Henderson said. If it was an accident, why hide it? Why lie for 25 years? Ryan's voice cracked. Because nobody would have believed me. The room fell still. Navarro exchanged a quick glance with Henderson. Believe you about what? She asked gently. Ryan's eyes glistened. It all happened so fast. I didn't... He stopped, shaking his head. I didn't kill her. Then who did? Henderson pressed. Ryan's silence returned, heavy and suffocating. He looked down, whispering, You don't get it. None of this was supposed to happen. Navarro slid the photo of Emily across the table again. Then tell us what did happen, because right now the evidence is telling a story you might never escape from. Ryan stared at the photo for several seconds before speaking. I saw her that morning. I was driving to practice. She was running down the trail, like always. There was another car, silver sedan, parked off the road. I thought nothing of it. He swallowed hard. Then something darted out. I swerved. I hit the ditch. I didn't know what I'd hit. Navarro's pen hovered over her notepad. Are you saying you hit Emily? Ryan looked haunted. No, I stopped. I checked the road. Nothing was there. But later, when they said she was missing, I panicked. Thought maybe I caused it. Henderson frowned. And the blood on your bumper. Ryan's voice fell to a whisper. It wasn't hers. Whose then? He shook his head. You wouldn't believe me. Navarro leaned closer. Try us. Ryan hesitated, his hands trembling. I can't, he said finally, voice breaking. If I talk, I ruin everything. I ruin him. Who? Henderson demanded. Ryan looked up, eyes hollow. You'll find out soon enough. As officers escorted him back to holding, Navarro turned to Henderson. He's telling partial truths, enough to sound plausible, but not enough to close the loop. Henderson exhaled. Then we find the missing piece. Someone else's fingerprints are all over this. The courtroom in downtown Denver buzzed with low voices and nervous energy. After months of speculation, Ryan Blake's trial had finally begun. Reporters filled the benches, cameras waiting outside for any glimpse of the man accused of keeping a 25-year-old secret. Ryan sat at the defense table beside his attorney, expression unreadable. His once steady hands trembled as the clerk read the charges aloud. Obstruction of justice, tampering with evidence, and suspicion of manslaughter in connection to Emily Carter's disappearance. He stared straight ahead, as if trying to hold on to a version of himself that no longer existed. Detective Lisa Navarro took her seat behind the prosecution, reviewing her notes one last time. Across the aisle, Carl Henderson sat quietly, his presence more symbolic than procedural. He wasn't part of the case anymore, but everyone knew it had always been his. The prosecutor began the opening statement. For 25 years, this community has lived without answers. Today, we bring those answers into the light. The defendant, Ryan Blake, withheld critical information that could have changed everything. He lied to investigators, destroyed physical evidence, and protected someone who didn't deserve protection. Ryan's lawyer rose, adjusting her glasses. What the prosecution calls lies, we call fear. My client was a teenager. He panicked. He's not a killer. He's a scapegoat for a case that haunted this city for decades. The first witnesses were called former classmates, teachers, even the retired mechanic, Paul Hanley. Each testimony added small fragments of truth, but none revealed what really happened that morning in 1998. When Jenna Morris took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She was older now, composed but visibly emotional. Emily was my best friend, she said softly. She trusted people too easily. I think that's why she got hurt. Did she ever mention Ryan Blake? The prosecutor asked. She said he was kind to her, Jenna replied. But she also said something that stuck with me. She thought he was hiding pain. Like he carried someone else's burden. Navarro glanced at Henderson. That phrase echoed in her mind, someone else's burden. Later, the prosecution presented the forensic findings. The courtroom projector displayed images, microscopic fibers, chemical reports, side-by-side photos of Ryan's truck. The evidence was compelling but incomplete. The physical proof placed Ryan near the scene. It didn't prove intent. When it was time for Ryan to testify, the tension peaked. His attorney advised against it, but he insisted. He took the stand, voice low but steady. "I made mistakes," he said. "I panicked. I was scared of the truth, scared of what people would think. But I didn't kill Emily. I didn't hurt her. I was just trying to protect someone who deserved it." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Who were you protecting?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "I can't say." "You can't, or you won't." He looked out over the courtroom, eyes landing on Henderson. "You already know." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Navarro's pen froze mid-note. And in that single cryptic sentence, the trial shifted, not toward conviction but toward revelation. The air in the courtroom felt heavier the next morning. Ryan Blake's cryptic statement, "You already know," had ignited a storm outside the courthouse. Reporters shouted questions. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Inside, the prosecution pushed for clarity, and the defense scrambled to contain the damage. But the only person who seemed truly shaken was Detective Carl Henderson. He hadn't slept. The words looped in his mind, echoing louder with every hour. "You already know." Henderson had reviewed every note, every name, every dead end from 1998, searching for what he might have missed. And then, just before dawn, he found it. A line from an old witness statement, one he'd skimmed over back then. Ryan's younger brother, Adam Blake, seen near Cherry Creek Trail the morning of the disappearance, claimed he was meeting friends, unverified. Now it clicked. When court resumed, Henderson asked to speak privately with Detective Navarro. She followed him into a side chamber, confusion on her face. "Carl, what's going on?" He handed her the old report. "We've been chasing the wrong Blake." Navarro scanned it quickly, her expression darkening. "Adam, he was what, 15 back then?" 17, Henderson corrected. "Old enough to drive, old enough to borrow his brother's truck." Within hours, a quiet interview was arranged. Adam Blake arrived pale and trembling. No lawyer, just a worn baseball cap pulled low. He looked at Henderson with haunted eyes. "Ryan didn't tell you." "Tell us what?" Navarro asked. Adam exhaled shakily. "It wasn't him. It was me." The confession poured out in broken fragments. He'd borrowed Ryan's truck that morning to meet friends near the trail. He'd been speeding down the service road when Emily darted out from the trees. There was a thud, soft but unmistakable. Panic took over. He stopped, saw her lying there, barely breathing. He called out, but she didn't move. "I didn't know what to do," Adam whispered, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Ryan showed up minutes later. He figured it out right away. Told me to go home, said he'd handle it. He promised it was an accident, said no one would believe us if we told the truth." Henderson's throat tightened. "So he took the blame. He fixed the truck, cleaned it up, carried that lie for 25 years. Adam nodded miserably. "He saved me. I ruined his life." When Navarro returned to the courtroom, Ryan looked up as their eyes met. She gave the faintest nod. His shoulders relaxed, the first sign of peace she'd ever seen in him. The judge called a recess. Reporters erupted as word spread that a new confession had emerged. Linda Carter sat in the gallery, frozen between grief and disbelief. David reached for her hand. "At least now we know," he whispered. Henderson stood by the doorway, staring at the light filtering through the old courthouse windows. After 25 years, the truth had finally surfaced. Not the monster everyone imagined, but a single, tragic mistake buried under loyalty and fear. The courtroom was quieter now, the tension replaced by a strange, heavy calm. The truth had finally surfaced, unexpected, tragic, yet undeniably human. Adam Blake sat on the witness stand, pale and trembling, his voice shaking as he repeated the confession. Every word carried 25 years of buried guilt. "I didn't mean to," he said softly. "She came out of nowhere. I tried to stop, but it was too late." Across the room, Linda Carter sat motionless. The crowd, once full of murmurs and speculation, listened in silence. There was no villain to despise anymore, only a boy who had panicked and a brother who had sacrificed everything to protect him. Ryan Blake watched from the defense table, eyes fixed on the floor. When Adam finished speaking, Ryan rose to his feet. "I told him to go," he said, voice low. "I thought I could fix it. I couldn't let him lose his life over a mistake." The judge's gavel struck gently. "Mr. Blake, please remain seated." But Ryan kept speaking. "I cleaned the truck. I lied to police. I lived every day knowing the truth was eating both of us alive. Emily didn't deserve what happened. Her family didn't deserve the silence." A tear slipped down Linda's cheek. For the first time, she looked directly at the man who had once been the ghost of her nightmares. "You could have told us," she said quietly. Ryan met her gaze. "I know, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought protecting him would somehow make it less wrong." The judge called for order, but the room felt suspended, years of grief and anger dissolving into something else. Compassion, maybe. Exhaustion. When the verdict came, it was measured: obstruction, tampering, and perjury. Ryan would serve a reduced sentence. Adam, though found responsible, would not face prison time due to the statute of limitations. Justice, though imperfect, had arrived. Outside the courthouse, Denver's sky stretched pale blue, eerily similar to that morning in 1998. Cameras flashed as the brothers were escorted out. Ryan turned to Henderson, who stood near the steps. "Thank you," he said simply. Henderson shook his head. "Don't thank me, I just followed the truth to where it led." That night, Linda visited Cherry Creek Trail for the first time in years. The path was empty, the creek still whispering beneath the bridge. She knelt near the memorial plaque, Emily's name etched in brass, and placed a single daisy beside it. "I hope you finally rest now," she whispered. "I hope we all can." The wind stirred the trees, carrying the faint scent of rain and earth. For the first time, the place felt peaceful, not haunted, not cursed, but quiet. When Henderson stopped by later, he found Linda sitting on a bench, eyes closed. He didn't speak. He just sat beside her, the two of them listening to the same steady rhythm of water and memory. "After all these years," Linda said softly, "it doesn't feel like an ending." "No," Henderson replied. "It feels like the truth finally caught up." Spring returned to Denver with quiet grace. The snow had melted from the Rockies, the air smelled of rain and pine, and Cherry Creek Trail came alive again. Runners, cyclists, and families moving along the path that once carried a story too heavy to tell. Yet beneath the laughter and motion, the memory of Emily Carter lingered, like the echo of footsteps long gone but never forgotten. A new bronze plaque stood near the bridge, in memory of Emily Carter, 1981-1998, gone but never lost. Flowers bloomed around it, some fresh, some wilted, but always there. For the community, it wasn't just a memorial. It was a promise that her name would never fade. Detective Carl Henderson walked the trail slowly that morning, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. He was thinner now, his hair white, but his eyes, steady and searching, were still sharp. The case had taken more from him than he ever admitted, but it had also given something back: the truth. And that, he'd learned, was the only kind of justice that lasted. He stopped by the plaque, noticing a single daisy resting at its base. He smiled faintly. Linda had been there. She visited every week, sometimes alone, sometimes with David, sometimes just sitting in silence for hours. Henderson had seen her once, eyes closed, face lifted toward the sun. Not broken anymore, just changed. A voice broke his thoughts. "Detective Henderson." He turned. It was Jenna Morris, older now, carrying a notebook and a press badge clipped to her jacket. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said with a soft smile. "Old habits," he replied. "Hard to let go." She nodded, then gestured toward the plaque. "I'm writing something for the Denver Post, a follow-up on Emily's case. Not about the tragedy, though. About what came after." "After?" Henderson asked. Jenna smiled faintly. how people healed, how the city learned to remember without staying stuck in grief. He studied her for a moment. That's a good story, the right one. She hesitated. Do you think Ryan and Adam will ever find peace? Henderson exhaled slowly. Maybe not peace, but maybe understanding. Sometimes that's all we get. They stood quietly, listening to the creek's steady murmur. The sound was almost musical, carrying the years with it, 1998, 2023, and everything in between. As Jenna walked away, Henderson stayed a moment longer. He reached out, tracing the engraved letters of Emily's name with a weathered hand. You mattered, he whispered. You still do. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains, Linda returned to the trail. The sky burned orange and violet, a canvas of endings and beginnings. She placed another daisy beside the plaque and closed her eyes. I hope you're running somewhere beautiful, she murmured. The wind picked up gently, stirring the petals at her feet. It almost sounded like laughter, distant, fleeting, but real enough to make her smile. And as twilight settled over Denver, the trail carried on, alive, eternal, echoing the truth that had finally been set free.